Good morning, or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And first of all, I'd like to start by thanking Joe for inviting me to speak here this afternoon. And the contributions over the last week have proven that MacGill Summer School continues to be a vibrant contributor to the national discourse, always broadening, examining and challenging. And we've all been talking or listening to this morning about how we need to get from A to B quicker. Well, all I can say is when I was driving through the mountains this morning to get here to Glanty's, I felt like doing what Pádraig does. Take off the watch, forget about the time and enjoy the moment. And I think that says a lot about rural Ireland. It is fitting that we're here today in rural Donegal, of course a county of spectacular beauty, at a summer school celebrating one of rural Ireland's greatest ever playwrights, for a debate which is essentially asking whether investing and prioritising rural Ireland is nothing more than an ill-judged and vainglorious pursuit of governments in search of higher approval ratings. Too often, these conversations take place in the cosy confines of Dublin too. Donegal is a case in point of both the challenges and the merits of investing in rural Ireland. Ireland is a small country, but it's easy to feel isolated or forgotten when you live in an area which has often been overlooked in terms of investment, both domestic and foreign. And as someone who lives on a farm in rural Ireland, just a few miles from the border, I know that feeling. Today's discussion should not be about urban versus rural, or indeed rural versus regional. Rather, it should be about how we can create sustainable communities by focusing on the indigenous potential of both people and place. The view that urban areas should be developed and promoted over the rural is missing one crucial factor: people. For it's the people of this small country which make it great. And it's the people of rural Ireland which make it a place worth fighting for. I do not believe it is feasible to simply promote the development of cities and large urban areas while rural areas are left to decline. It's easy to accuse politicians of tending towards the populist, the palatable, but forget about the politicians. What about the people? What would the people of North West Donegal think if the policy makers of the day told them they weren't going to be provided with public services, the transport links would cease, that the airport would close and the school buses would stop running because there isn't a sufficient population cluster to justify such supports? Policy making shouldn't be just about cold, hard statistics. In my view, it is the job of the politician to combine policy with people, to consider the impact of policy decisions on people's lives. That does not have to lead to bad short-term decision making, but it does mean that a balance has to be struck between people and place. The new partnership government has placed a particular focus on the need to revitalise and rejuvenate rural Ireland. When the new government was being appointed, the Taoiseach announced that I would retain all of the existing responsibilities of the Department of Arts, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, with additional responsibilities for rural affairs and regional development. So clearly, Enda thought I didn't have enough to keep myself out of trouble. So I was delighted to be retaining the responsibilities of my existing department. To name just two priorities, it meant, as Donna said, I could see out the centenary celebrations with which so much work had been poured into, and I was also keen to continue my work on Culture 2025, the first ever national cultural strategy which was published in draft form earlier this week. But I was also delighted to be given the extra responsibility of rural Ireland, because I am passionate about rural Ireland. I believe in it. I have lived in rural Ireland for most of my life, after I spent a short time in Dublin in my 20s. And I can honestly say I really don't want to live anywhere else. When I think of rural Ireland, I think of communities incredibly proud of their local town or their local village. I think of the GAA, I think of the IFA, I think of the ICA, I think of small local drama groups putting on their own productions of Dancing at Lunasa or Philadelphia, Here I Come. I think of people. The government wants to ensure that as the economy continues to recover, people living in rural areas are given a fair crack of the whip. We want to build a more evenly spread recovery, which will in turn help build a fairer and a more just society. Much of the rhetoric bandied about in relation to rural Ireland is inaccurate and has a self-perpetuating negativity. Despite much talk of rural Ireland being in decline, we know that the official statistics show that the fastest job growth has been outside the capital. Unemployment has fallen in every region since the crash. This hasn't happened by accident. The previous Fine Gael-led government focused on building an export-led recovery based on growing indigenous businesses. Now the challenge is to future-proof the regions to safeguard and sustain that economic growth. In my view, the single most important factor in the sustainability and continued rejuvenation of rural Ireland and the regions is the rollout of rural broadband. High-speed broadband has the potential to be a game changer for rural Ireland and its development and investment opportunities. And Tony, you have made the argument well. It quite literally will plug rural communities into a world of opportunities which are currently out of reach. Delivering the National Broadband Plan is a top priority for Government, and the allocation of new responsibilities at Cabinet level also signals the Government's firm intention to address broadband and other telecoms challenges in rural Ireland. I'm working closely with my colleague, the Minister for Communications, Denis Naughton, to deliver key elements of the National Broadband Plan and to accelerate and prioritise the rollout of the programme in rural areas. The aim is to deliver high-speed broadband to every home, school and business by 2020 through a combination of commercial investment and state intervention. Essentially, the state will intervene where commercial providers are failing to reach. The Department of Communications is continuing to manage the procurement process for the state contract, which is expected to be awarded in summer of 2017. In the meantime, my new department is working with local authorities to eliminate any roadblocks so we can ensure that towns and villages and rural areas are broadband ready when the contract is signed. And Tony has mentioned a number of the roadblocks that are there at present, and I only met yesterday with the local authority, city and county managers, and I have asked them to appoint a broadband coordinator in every single county, a point of contact. I've asked them to come together and prepare a broadband plan for each county so that they become broadband ready, and to deal with those issues, Tony, that you have raised, because they need to be dealt with. So what I'm saying to them now is it's about getting the runway ready so that the plane can land smoothly next summer. And it is difficult sometimes it's difficult to overestimate the challenge we're facing. The broadband black spots in need of state intervention account for 750,000 addresses, and it covers 96% of our landmass. So what we're talking about here is similar to 100,000 kilometres of road network, transversing areas which are home to 1.8 million people. So this is a big job, and it is akin to rural electrification. But it will be worth the effort, and I believe it will have a transformative effect on rural Ireland. And Tony is right. Broadband opens Ireland up to the global market. High-quality broadband, I believe, is one of the many tools we can use to empower rural communities. The revitalisation of rural Ireland must be based on sustainable development. We must learn from the mistakes of the past. We are all well versed on the mistakes of the construction bubble, when our young men were recruited and trained in their droves in an industry which was built on sand. The old approach of an IDA factory for every town didn't work either. It was a false promise and one that was generally never fulfilled. Through the implementation of regional jobs plans, the government is encouraging each region to focus on its strengths by supporting indigenous businesses and linking education with industry. We can give each region the best possible chance of success. Take, for example, a business in my own constituency of Cavan of Monaghan, and I see some constituents here, so they'll be familiar with this business. Combi Lift is a homegrown Monaghan success story. It's a jewel in the crown of Enterprise Ireland. Since it was first started by Martin McVicker and Robert Moffat 18 years ago, the company has grown into a global leader in forklift manufacturing. It now exports to over 75 countries, and last year Combi Lift announced a major expansion plan in County Monaghan and with the creation of another 200 jobs, and that's on top of the almost 300 that they're currently employing. Crucially, the company has teamed up with Cavan Monaghan Education and Training Board to develop a series of new apprenticeship programmes to ensure these jobs can be filled by local graduates. And that's a formula that works, and that's one that I want to see replicated nationwide, because we must accept that not all young people want to go to university. Some want to go straight into employment and get a job. And I think this is more prevalent among young men in rural Ireland, and apprenticeships provide the best way of educating them and gives them the best of both worlds, and that is how we can improve the statistics that Padraig said, that where 60% education is 60% lower in rural areas. And I really do believe that the apprenticeship scheme is a way forward, and it's a way forward for rural Ireland, because sometimes you can allow the young farmer go to work and also farm at home. It's a combination of both worlds. I think it gives a great result, and it's something that we need to invest further on. Sustainable development should also mean that national decisions about rural Ireland, of course, are not taken in isolation. The CEDRA report published under the last government looked at how to revitalise rural Ireland. One of its most important findings was the realisation that in order to fully support sustainable rural development, there was a critical need for a more integrated approach across all government departments and government agencies. This is not a new concept, and indeed much of the relevant sectoral frameworks accept the need for this kind of approach. This government's increased commitment to supporting sustainable rural development in an integrated way has already been formalised through its commitment in the Charter for Rural Ireland published earlier this year, and indeed the creation of my portfolio. And now I will be developing an action plan for rural Ireland. The action plan format, developed so successfully through the Action Plan for Jobs, takes a strategic approach based on implementation. Government departments are given key objectives which they must meet in the context of regional and local priorities. A regular and structured reporting mechanism will be initiated, and progress reports will be delivered to the Cabinet Committee on Regional and Rural Affairs, which is chaired by the Taoiseach. Included in this process will be the consideration of regional and rural issues in the design of the National Planning Framework. The framework is the follow-up to the National Spatial Strategy, and its development will be led by the Department of Housing, Planning, Community and Local Government. The National Planning Framework is a long-term 20-year national plan outlining a high-level spatial vision for Ireland. It will be the overarching plan for which other regionally and locally based plans will emanate. My department will be working closely with the Department of Housing, Planning, Community and Local Government to ensure that the regional and rural perspective is fully considered as part of the planning framework design process. the Government is determined to plan for the future and to deliver the best for both urban and rural Ireland. One of the many issues which will be addressed as part of the Action Plan for Rural Ireland is that of town and village renewal. The best way to revitalise a town or village is to bring life back into it. And one of the many mistakes of the Celtic Tiger years was to drive business and investment out of town centres with the development of sprawling, out-of-town retail spaces. We can't wipe out these developments, but we can look at ways to encourage people back into our towns and villages. And I do agree with John on this, that we need to make our towns and our villages more attractive. And I'm looking at options to make it more attractive for young couples to move back into town centres, maybe as a first-time home. If you look across Europe, people live not just in city centres, but also in town and village centres. And we have a plethora of heritage buildings which are wholly or partially vacant. And there's so many of them there. And I believe there is a real opportunity to both address our housing challenges and bring life back and vitality back into our town centres. I also believe there's a real opportunity for the Arts and Rural Affairs section of my brief to mutually benefit each other. The success of the 2016 commemorations, which were rooted in arts and culture, was a testament to the vibrancy of rural Ireland. The 2016 Centenary Programme, which I had the honour of heading up, flourished as a ground-up initiative embraced by local communities. The tally of community events held as part of the programme has now reached far beyond 3,500, which is so far beyond anything that any of us could have imagined just a year ago. Through arts and culture, local communities have interpreted and interrogated the events of 100 years ago, leading to an honest and complete examination of our history. So many of our best-loved artists and writers have been inspired by rural Ireland, and in turn, I believe the arts can play a very valuable role in our rural recovery. Supporting and investing in arts in the regions and in the counties will help local communities to thrive and to showcase their own unique creativity. And now, as we continue on towards, we have a lot of the commemorations have taken place now, and we're going to move into a different phase in our commemorative year. We're going to look at looking to the future. And as Don has said, I'd like to see a national conversation around here we are, 100 years on, look to the future, the next 100 years, and have a conversation about our values and about where we want to go as a country. So that's something that I hope you will join with us in reimagining our future in the final stage of our commemorative year. When considering how to prioritise investment on a long-term basis, we must ask ourselves, what makes Ireland different from all the other small countries on this earth? For a nation of 4 million people, what makes us stand out from the global crowd? I believe it is our people and our culture. Our culture gives us the edge. Our landscape, our heritage, and our people make this country unique. We are inextricably linked to the land that has shaped our culture over the centuries. Much of the needs of rural communities are, of course, different to that of urban communities, but I do not think that one should be pitted against the other. To migrate all of our people into large urban areas would destroy the fabric of rural Ireland and eliminate so much of what makes this country distinctive. Creating sustainable rural and regional communities through long-term planning, utilising the advantages provided by modern technology and helping towns and villages to play to their strengths will allow us to develop a broader-based, fairer economy. It cannot simply be a numbers game where we say to ourselves that rural communities must be sacrificed for the sake of cheaper, more efficient living in urban spaces. We must strive to build a society which values both people and place. And I'll finish by quoting a fellow Monaghan native, Patrick Kavanagh. Letting the facts speak for themselves is an immoral principle when we all know that facts and figures can be selected to prove anything. Gura míle maith.